Welcome to Midnight Sleep Chronicles. I'm glad you're here. Tonight, we're exploring something truly extraordinary. Something that's been with you every moment of your existence, yet remains one of the deepest mysteries humanity has ever contemplated. You'll discover why the same hour can feel like an eternity or vanish like smoke, why ancient kings built monuments to capture it, and why philosophers still argue about whether it even exists at all. Time, that invisible river carrying us forward. Or is it? Perhaps you'll find yourself drifting along with these thoughts longer than you planned. If so, well, at least there will be something beautiful to ponder as sleep finds you. But before we begin, I'd love it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It truly means the world to me. And I'm always curious, where are you listening from? And what hour is it where you are? Write about it in the comments. It's always fascinating to read. Now, let's begin. Act 1. Reality. There's something peculiar about this very moment. Right now, as you hear these words, you exist in what we call the present. But that present, that now you're experiencing, it's already gone. By the time your mind has processed this sentence, it's become the past. The future rushes toward you, transforms into now, and immediately dissolves into memory. All of it happening so smoothly, so seamlessly, that you barely notice the magic trick your consciousness is performing. You live your entire life in a razor-thin slice of existence we call now. Yet somehow, you remember yesterday. You anticipate tomorrow. You plan for next year. You reflect on decades gone by. Time seems to stretch in all directions around you, an ocean of moments, but you can only ever stand in this one single drop, this perpetual present that keeps moving forward. Or does it move at all? Maybe you're the one moving through it. Or perhaps both of you are standing still, and it's everything else that's shifting. The ancient philosophers wrestled with this question, lying awake under star-filled skies, wondering whether time was a thing unto itself or merely a way humans made sense of change. Long before clocks divided the day into neat little boxes, before calendars organized years into grids, humans looked up. The sky was humanity's first timekeeper. The sun rose, traced its arc across the heavens, and set. Day became night. Night became day. This rhythm was so fundamental, so undeniable, that it shaped everything about how our ancestors lived. But even that simple observation raised questions. Why did the sun follow this path? Where did it go at night? The ancient Egyptians, standing on the banks of the Nile, watched the sun's daily journey and saw something profound. They noticed that certain stars appeared in the sky at certain times of year. They observed that the Nile flooded predictably, seasonally. Patterns emerged from the chaos. The Egyptians didn't just notice these patterns, they measured them. They created one of the first solar calendars, dividing the year into 365 days. 12 months of 30 days each, plus 5 extra days they considered outside of normal time, days when the veil between worlds grew thin. They built temples aligned with perfect precision to catch the first rays of sunlight on specific days, turning stone and geometry into cosmic clocks. Consider the temple at Abu Simbel, carved into a mountainside. Twice a year, on what we now call February 21st and October 21st, the rising sun penetrates deep into the temple's inner sanctum, illuminating statues of gods that sit in complete darkness the rest of the year. The Egyptians built this around 3,200 years ago, calculating angles and positions with such precision that the light still finds its target millennia later. They were catching time in stone, marking moments they deemed sacred, trying to hold onto something that by its nature cannot be held. In Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the Sumerians looked at the same sky and saw different patterns. They divided the day into 12 periods, each period into 30 parts. The number 60 held sacred significance for them. It could be divided so many ways, by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, 30. This mathematical elegance felt right, felt true. And so, our hours still contain 60 minutes. Our minutes still hold 60 seconds. We inherited their numbers, their divisions of time, without even realizing we're speaking in an ancient Sumerian dialect every time we check our watch. The Sumerians also gave us the 7-day week, though its origins are tangled with Babylonian astronomy. They observed 7 celestial bodies that moved against the fixed stars: the Sun, the Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. Each got a day named in their honor. Even now, if you speak a Romance language, you can hear their names: Monday for the Moon, Saturday for Saturn. In English, we kept some and traded others for Norse gods, but the 7-day pattern persists, unbroken for thousands of years. The Greeks added something new to this conversation. They gave us 2 words for time, 2 concepts that feel subtly different even now. Chronos, the quantitative time, the tick-tock march of seconds and hours. Chronos is time that can be measured, divided, spent. Then there's Kairos, the qualitative time, the right moment, the opportune instant. Kairos is about meaning, not duration. It's the feeling you get when time seems pregnant with possibility, when a single moment expands and everything hinges on what happens next. Think about that distinction for a moment. You've experienced both kinds of time. Chronos is waiting in line at the post office, watching the clock, feeling every minute drag. Kairos is the instant you lock eyes with someone across a crowded room and the world seems to pause. Chronos measures, Kairos matters. The Romans, practical as always, focused on organizing Chronos. They needed to coordinate their vast empire, to schedule military campaigns, to know when taxes were due and when ships would arrive. They refined the calendar, eventually creating the Julian calendar under Julius Caesar, which brought order to the administrative chaos of tracking time across dozens of provinces and cultures. But Julius Caesar's calendar wasn't perfect. It calculated the year as 365 and a quarter days, which is close, but slightly too long. Over centuries, this tiny error accumulated. By the 16th century, the calendar had drifted 10 days out of sync with the solar year. Pope Gregory XIII corrected this in 1582, creating our current Gregorian calendar. To fix the drift, they simply deleted 10 days. People went to sleep on October 4th and woke up on October 15th. Those 10 days never existed for anyone alive then. Time itself seemed to skip forward, an administrative decision erasing part of history. Even as they organized time into neat administrative units, the Romans couldn't escape its strangeness. They noticed something interesting about their own perception. Time seemed to speed up as they aged. The poet Ovid wrote about how years flew faster with each passing decade. The elder Seneca reflected on how youth seemed to last forever, while old age arrived in what felt like an instant. They didn't have the language of neuroscience to explain it, but they felt it in their bones. That unsettling acceleration, that sense that time itself was somehow elastic, stretching and compressing based on factors they couldn't quite name. In China, time took on a cyclical character. The ancient Chinese developed calendars that tracked not just the sun, but also the moon, creating lunisolar calendars that acknowledged multiple rhythms happening simultaneously. They divided time into 12 double hours, each associated with an animal. But more than that, they saw time as moving in great cycles, 60-year cycles, each year bearing a unique combination of elements and animals, returning again and again like a cosmic spiral. The Chinese also divided the year into 24 solar terms, marking subtle shifts in season and weather. They had names for moments like awakening of insects, when the first spring thunder supposedly woke hibernating creatures, and white dew, when morning moisture began to condense on grass as autumn approached. These weren't arbitrary divisions. They were observations of nature's rhythms, attempts to live in harmony with time's natural flow rather than imposing artificial structure upon it. This cyclical view wasn't unique to China. Many ancient cultures saw time as a wheel, endlessly turning. The Mayans developed calendars of staggering complexity, tracking multiple cycles simultaneously. Their long count calendar measured time in units called kins, roughly equivalent to days. 20 kins made a weinal. 18 weinals made a ton, about 360 days. 20 tons made a cartoon. 20 cartoons made a barktoon, roughly 394 years. They watched these wheels within wheels turn, calculating backwards to a creation date and forward into vast stretches of future time. Their Dresden Codex contains astronomical tables predicting eclipses with remarkable accuracy, proving they could see patterns in the sky that repeated across generations. They calculated the length of the solar year as 365.2420 days. Modern astronomy, with all our instruments, calculates it as 365.2422 days. The Maya were off by only 17 seconds per year, an error so small it would take 5,000 years to accumulate a single day's difference. What's striking about all these ancient timekeeping systems isn't just their technical sophistication, it's the deeper question they raise. Why did humans everywhere feel this need to measure time? What was it about the flow of moments that demanded marking, counting, organizing? Perhaps it's because time brings change, and change brings death. Every ancient culture that learned to measure time was in some sense trying to hold mortality at arm's length. If you could measure time, maybe you could control it. If you could predict the future positions of stars and planets, maybe you could read fate itself. If you could divide time into manageable pieces, maybe the infinite stretch of it wouldn't feel so terrifying. The ancient Babylonians didn't just create calendars. They invented astrology, the belief that the positions of celestial bodies at the moment of your birth determined your character and fate. They were essentially saying time and space intersect in meaningful ways. The when and where of your existence matters. The universe is not random. There are patterns, and those patterns mean something. This wasn't superstition in the way we might think. It was an attempt to find order in chaos, to believe that time unfolded according to some grand design, rather than mere accident. And that impulse, that need to believe in meaningful time, it never went away. We still look for signs, for patterns, for the sense that this moment, right now, is somehow special. Medieval monks in European monasteries took timekeeping to a new level of precision. They needed to coordinate their prayers, to wake for matins in the dead of night, to mark the canonical hours that structured monastic life. They developed mechanical clocks using weights and gears to simulate the steady rotation of the heavens. These early mechanical clocks were wildly inaccurate by modern standards. They might gain or lose 15 minutes a day, but they represented something revolutionary. Time divorced from the sky. You could measure hours in a windowless room. You could divide night and day into equal portions regardless of the season. Time became something you could build, something made of metal and mathematics rather than sunlight and stars. The invention of the mechanical clock changed consciousness itself. Suddenly, time wasn't something that happened to you. It was something you possessed, something you could save or waste. The very language around time shifted. People began to speak of spending time, buying time, losing time, as if it were a currency, a resource to be managed. Consider how radical this shift was. For most of human history, you worked when there was light and rested when it was dark. You planted in spring because that's when things grow. You harvested in autumn because that's when crops ripen. Time was tied to natural cycles, to the rhythms of sun and season. But mechanical time freed you from that and enslaved you to something else. Now you could work night shifts. Now factory whistles could summon you to labor, regardless of whether the sun had risen. Time became something that could be bought and sold, and with it, so could human life itself, divided into hours and compensated accordingly. Factories and railways demanded even greater precision. By the 19th century, towns kept their own local time, based on the sun's position. But when trains began connecting distant cities, confusion reigned. A train departing at noon in one town might arrive at what that town called noon, but was actually 11:45, according to the destination's clocks. The solution was standardized time zones, another instance of human organization imposing order on time's natural flow. In 1883, North American railroads divided the continent into 4 time zones. The world followed suit, carving the globe into 24 slices, each 1 hour wide. Yet for all this increasing precision, for all these gears and springs and synchronized clocks, time remained mysterious. Einstein would eventually prove what the ancient philosophers suspected. Time isn't absolute. It bends, it stretches, it slows near massive objects and speeds up far from them. 2 people can experience different amounts of time passing, and both can be equally correct. Time, it turns out, is relative. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before Einstein, before mechanical clocks, before calendars carved in stone, there were stories. Humans didn't just measure time. They dreamed about it. They told tales of time's strange powers, of moments that lasted forever and eternities that passed in an instant. They wondered what it would mean to escape time entirely, to live forever, or to return to the past and change what was. These weren't idle fantasies. These were attempts to understand something that felt simultaneously obvious and impossible. Time was the water you swam in, so ever present that you forgot it was even there until suddenly you drowned in its passage and realized your whole life had been spent without your permission. Let's slow down for a moment. Take a breath. Feel the weight of your body, wherever you're resting right now. Notice how even in stillness, time continues. Your heart beats, your lungs expand, and contract. Blood moves through your veins. On the cellular level, millions of processes unfold every second. You are not static. You are a pattern of change that maintains its shape, like a whirlpool in a river, constantly new water flowing through the same form. The ancient Heraclitus said you can never step in the same river twice. The river changes, and you change. Yet somehow, identity persists. You recognize yourself in old photographs even though virtually every cell in your body has been replaced multiple times since that picture was taken. Scientists estimate that the average age of all the cells in an adult human body is 7 to 10 years. Your skeleton rebuilds itself completely every 10 years. Your liver regenerates every few months. Even your brain, once thought to be fixed after childhood, continues generating new neurons in certain regions throughout your life. What are you, if not a pattern in time? A continuity of consciousness riding the wave of perpetual change. You are more like a flame than a stone. A flame maintains its shape, its identity, even though the fuel and oxygen flowing through it constantly change. The flame you see now is not the same flame that existed a moment ago, and yet it is unmistakably the same flame. This is what you are, a self-organizing pattern of matter and energy that persists through time by constantly transforming. This is where time stops being just about calendars and clocks. This is where it becomes personal, intimate, strange. Your relationship with time shapes your entire experience of being alive. And the stories humans have told about time across millennia reveal just how deeply we've always sensed its mysteries. Asit 2. Legends. There's an old Japanese tale about a fisherman named Urashima Taro. One day, while walking along the beach, he saw some children tormenting a turtle. Being kind-hearted, he paid the children to leave the creature alone and released it back into the sea. The next day, the same turtle appeared and spoke to him. The turtle was actually a servant of the Dragon King, ruler of the undersea realm, and the fisherman was invited to visit the magnificent palace beneath the waves as thanks for his kindness. Urashima Taro descended into the ocean and found a world of wonder. The palace was beyond description, its walls made of coral and pearl, its halls filled with light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The Dragon King's daughter greeted him, and he fell in love immediately. They spent days together, or what seemed like days. The princess showed him gardens where seasons changed from moment to moment, where spring flowers bloomed beside autumn, leaves beside winter frost. Time felt different there, fluid, dreamlike. Eventually, Urashima Taro grew homesick. He missed his village, his parents. The princess gave him a beautiful lacquered box and made him promise never to open it. "As long as this box remains sealed," she said, "you can return to us." He agreed, said his farewells, and rowed the turtle back to the surface. But when he reached his village, nothing was familiar. The houses were different. The people were strangers. His parents' home was gone. Confused and frightened, he asked the villagers about his family. An old woman finally remembered. There was a fisherman by that name who disappeared at sea, but that was 300 years ago. What had felt like days in the undersea palace had been centuries in the world above. Devastated, Urashima Taro opened the forbidden box, hoping to find some answer, some comfort. White smoke poured out and enveloped him. In moments, he aged 300 years. His black hair turned white, his smooth skin wrinkled, He collapsed on the beach, an ancient man, and died. This story, told in various forms across East Asia, captures something fundamental about our anxiety around time, that it might not flow at the same rate everywhere, that you could lose yourself in a moment of joy and discover that the world you knew has vanished, that everyone you loved is gone. That time is not the safe, steady river we pretend it is, but something far more dangerous and strange. In Celtic mythology, mortals who ventured into the fairy realm faced similar dangers. The Sidhe, the fairy folk, lived outside normal time. A person might dance at a fairy celebration for what felt like a single night, only to return home and find that 100 years had passed. Trees had grown old. Entire generations had been born, lived, and died. The warning in these tales was clear. Don't go chasing timeless moments. Don't try to escape the regular flow of chronos. There's a price for stepping outside time, and that price is losing your place in the human world, losing the people who anchor you, losing the life you knew. Yet the temptation persists. Who hasn't wanted to make a perfect moment last forever? Who hasn't wished they could return to some golden yesterday? The ancient Greeks told of the lotus eaters, people who consumed a magical fruit that made them forget their homes and families, content to live in an eternal present without memory or anticipation. It was both paradise and prison. In Jewish folklore, there's a story about a rabbi who questioned why God had taken an entire day of rest after creating the world. Surely for God, the rabbi argued, 1,000 years pass in a day, and a day contains 1,000 years. What meaning does rest have for a being who exists outside time? That night, the rabbi had a dream. He was walking beside a river when he saw a beautiful bird he'd never encountered before. Enchanted, he followed it. The bird led him deep into a forest, then vanished. Lost, the rabbi wandered until he found a cottage. A family welcomed him in, gave him food and shelter. He stayed with them. Days turned into weeks. He met a woman, fell in love, married. They had children. He watched his children grow. He grew old. His wife grew old beside him. They had grandchildren. A whole lifetime unfolded, rich with joy and sorrow, love and loss. Then he woke up. Only a single night had passed. His whole long life had been one night's dream. And suddenly, he understood. A day to God might contain universes of experience. Rest wasn't about duration. It was about completion, about stepping back from creation and recognizing it as finished. Time in these stories becomes flexible, subjective, tied to consciousness rather than clocks. And that's not just mythology. That's lived experience. You know this. Think about the last time you were truly bored. Minutes felt like hours. Now think about the last time you were absorbed in something you loved. Hours felt like minutes. Your brain doesn't have a perfect clock. It estimates time based on how much information it processes, how many new experiences it encodes. Novel experiences stretch time. Routine compresses it. This is why childhood seems to last forever and adult years flash by. Everything is new when you're young. Every day contains discoveries. As you age and fall into patterns, days blur together. Your brain stops marking them as distinct. There's a beautiful and melancholic story from the medieval Persian tradition about a man named Nasir. He was a scholar, devoted to his books, always seeking the next piece of knowledge. One day, while reading in his garden, he came across a passage describing the 7 heavens and the throne of God beyond them. Nasir wondered, what does God see when he looks down at us? What is our world from that timeless perspective? At that moment, Nasir noticed a bird he'd never seen before perched on his garden wall. It had brilliant plumage, shifting colors. Transfixed, he followed as the bird flew from wall to tree to rooftop, leading him through the city streets and finally out into the countryside. They came to a stream, and Nasir, realizing how thirsty he'd become, bent down to drink. When he lifted his head, the bird was gone, and the landscape had changed. The stream was wider, the trees were different. He walked toward what he thought was his city, but the city he found was not the one he'd left. The architecture was wrong. The clothes people wore were unfamiliar. Speaking to the residents, he learned that centuries had passed. His family, his books, his entire life had been lost to time. Grief-stricken, Nasir fell to his knees and prayed, asking God why this had happened to him. And a voice spoke, not with sound, but directly into his heart. You asked to see as I see. This is my vision. All of time spread out at once, past and future equally present. You have lived your answer. Nasir closed his eyes, accepting this truth. When he opened them again, he was back in his garden, book open on his lap. Only a single drop of water had fallen from the fountain nearby. The experience of centuries had occurred in less than a second. The story ends with Nasir living the rest of his days differently. He still studied, still read, but he was never again lost in abstractions. He paid attention to each moment, to each person he met, knowing that this breath, right now, contained everything. Past and future were just ghosts. Only the present was real. These stories from different cultures, different eras, they're all circling the same mystery. Time is not what it appears to be. It's not a simple forward march. It's something stranger, something bound up with consciousness, with attention, with meaning. In Hindu philosophy, there's the concept of Maya, often translated as illusion. But Maya doesn't mean that the world is fake. It means the world as we perceive it is not the deepest truth. Our senses show us separation, solidity, change. But beneath that, there's something eternal, unchanging. Time itself might be part of Maya, a way consciousness experiences the eternal by breaking it into moments, into before and after. The Bhagavad Gita contains a scene where the warrior Arjuna asks the god Krishna to reveal his true form. Krishna obliges, and Arjuna sees something overwhelming. He sees all of time at once, past, present, and future simultaneous. He sees his enemies already dead, their deaths already complete in the eternal now, even though the battle hasn't started yet. He sees his own death. He sees the birth and death of universes, and it's too much. He begs Krishna to return to human form, to allow him to experience time normally again, moment by sequential moment, so that existence is bearable. There's profound wisdom in that story, maybe linear time. This sense of one thing following another isn't a limitation. Maybe it's a mercy. Maybe experiencing everything at once would be not enlightenment, but annihilation of the self. We need time's flow to have stories, to have growth, to have meaning. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia have a concept called dream time. It's often misunderstood as referring to the past, to creation stories. But dream time is more complex than that. It's a kind of eternal present that runs alongside normal time. It's the realm where the ancestors still live, where the world is still being created. Ceremonies and songs can access dream time, can bring that eternal creative power into the here and now. When an Aboriginal elder performs a ceremony passed down through thousands of years, they're not just commemorating the past, they're participating in the same moment as their ancestors. Time becomes circular, or perhaps it's better to say time reveals its true shape, which is not a line, but a spiral, or a web, or something our linear language struggles to describe. European folklore has its own tales of time gone strange. The story of Rip Van Winkle, though American in its most famous version, draws on much older Dutch and German traditions. A man falls asleep and wakes to find decades have passed. These stories often feature sleeping under hills or in caves, liminal spaces where normal rules don't apply. There's a Scottish ballad about Thomas the Rhymer, a poet who met the Queen of Elfland and spent what he thought was 3 days in her realm. When he returned to the mortal world, 7 years had passed. But the Queen gave him a gift, the tongue that could not lie. Whatever he spoke would be truth. This seems like a blessing until you realize what it means. Thomas could no longer engage in polite society. He couldn't tell a white lie to spare feelings. He couldn't use metaphor or exaggeration. He spoke only literal truth, and it alienated him from other people. The gift was also a curse, and the curse was also a gift. His time in Elfland, outside normal time, had changed him so fundamentally that he could no longer quite belong to the world of Chronos. He touched Kairos, that eternal, meaningful time, and it marked him forever. These myths, these legends, they cluster around certain themes. Time moves differently for gods and spirits than for humans. There are places where time breaks down. Seeking to escape time carries terrible costs. But also, there's something beyond normal time, something sacred and terrifying, and those who glimpse it are never quite the same. In Japanese folklore, there's a tale about a monk who discovered a cave where time moved differently. For every hour spent inside, only a minute passed outside, or perhaps it was the reverse. The stories vary. The monk would enter the cave to meditate, and in what felt like years of spiritual practice, only days would pass in the outside world. He became incredibly wise and enlightened. But there was a cost. He aged according to the time he experienced inside the cave, not the time that passed outside. His body grew old while the world around him barely changed. Eventually, he had to choose: continue his accelerated spiritual practice and die young by outside standards, but old by his own experience, or abandon the cave and live a normal lifespan, but never reach the depths of enlightenment he'd tasted. The story doesn't tell us what he chose. That's left ambiguous, a question for the listener. What would you choose? Would you trade quantity of time for quality of experience? In Celtic lore, there are accounts of people stumbling into fairy rings, circular formations of mushrooms or stones, and vanishing from the mortal world. Sometimes they'd return immediately from their perspective, but find that years had gone by. Sometimes they'd be gone for minutes and claim they'd lived entire lives in the fairy realm. Time didn't just slow down or speed up. It became incoherent, following rules that made sense in the moment, but collapsed into paradox when examined closely. One tale speaks of a farmer who stepped into a fairy ring and found himself at a grand feast. He ate and drank, danced with beautiful figures who seemed almost human, but not quite. When he finally left, he expected to be scolded for being gone all night. Instead, his family claimed he'd only been missing for a few seconds. But he'd aged. Grey had touched his hair. Lines had appeared on his face. He insisted he'd been gone for months. His family saw him vanish and reappear in a heartbeat. Both were true, somehow. These stories raise a troubling question. Is there even such a thing as objective time? Or is time always relative to the observer, to the consciousness experiencing it? Modern physics, particularly Einstein's theories of relativity, actually support this strange idea. Time is not absolute. It can stretch and compress depending on velocity and gravity. Two people can experience different durations, and both are equally valid. But let's step back from the stories for a moment and think about your own experience. You've lived through moments that stretched. You've lived through periods that compressed. You remember childhood summers that seemed endless, and you remember recent years that flew past in a blur. Time hasn't changed. You have. Psychological time, the time of experience, follows different rules than clock time. When you're in pain, seconds expand into eternities. When you're in joy, hours evaporate. When you're learning something new, time is rich and full. When you're going through routine motions, time becomes thin, and days blur together until you look back at months and can barely remember them because nothing distinct happened to mark them as separate. This is why travelers often report that their trips felt longer than they actually were. Every day contained new sights, new experiences, new information to process. The brain marks each day as distinct. But when you're home, following your usual patterns, driving the same route to work, seeing the same people, eating the same meals, the brain doesn't bother making strong, separate memories. Days pile up undifferentiated. So in a very real sense, you can make your life longer, not by adding more years, but by adding more novelty, more presence, more attention. By living each day fully enough that it stands out in memory as its own unique thing, rather than blending into an indistinct grey mass of routine. The legends about time, they're not just entertainment. They're attempts to communicate this truth. Time is not what it seems. It's not a river flowing at constant speed. It's something responsive to consciousness, something that bends around moments of meaning and intensity. There's a reason why every culture's mythology includes divine beings who exist outside time or who can manipulate it. From the Greek, fates, who spin, measure, and cut the thread of each life, determining how much time each person receives, to the Hindu god Shiva, whose dance creates and destroys universes in endless cycles, to the Mayan god Itzamna, who invented time itself and gave it to humanity as both gift and burden. These gods represent our intuition that time is not the ultimate reality. There's something beyond it, something eternal that watches the flow of temporal events without being caught up in them. And part of us longs to touch that eternal perspective, to see our lives from outside the rushing stream, even though we know the attempt is dangerous. Here's another story, this one from the Sufi tradition in Islamic mysticism. A young student asked his master, "What is time?" The master said, "Come with me." They walked to a river. The master said, "Put your head in the water and hold it there as long as you can." The student obeyed. He submerged his head. Seconds passed. His lungs began to burn. He held on. The burning intensified. Panic rose. Finally, he wrenched his head up, gasping and coughing. "Why did you make me do that?" he demanded, once he'd caught his breath. The master smiled. "How long were you under?" It felt like forever, an eternity of drowning. It was 15 seconds. But now, tell me, while your head was underwater and you were desperate for air, Did you think about yesterday? Did you worry about tomorrow? The student paused. No, there was only the moment, only the need for breath. That, said the master, is the secret. Time expands when you're fully present. It compresses when your mind is elsewhere. You were in that water for 15 seconds of clock time, but you experienced an eternity because you were completely there. Most people live in the past or future, never fully inhabiting their present, so years pass like seconds. You spent 15 seconds in absolute presence, and it felt like a lifetime. This is the path. To live each moment so completely that you need no other. The student understood. Time wasn't something happening to him. It was something he created through the quality of his attention. These teaching stories, these myths and legends, they're all pointing in the same direction, toward presence, toward the idea that time is not something to be conquered or escaped, but something to be experienced fully. The tragedy isn't that time passes. The tragedy is passing through time without really being here for it. Act 3. Mythology. Let's drift now into even stranger waters, into the realm where time touches the eternal, where the temporal meets the timeless. We're moving from legends toward mythology proper, toward the deepest questions about time's ultimate nature. Here's a question worth sitting with. What would it mean to truly live forever? Not just a long life, but actual immortality, endless time stretching before you. Many myths explore this, and curiously, almost all of them treat immortality as a curse, not a blessing. The ancient Greek goddess Eos, the dawn, fell in love with a mortal man named Tithonus. She begged Zeus to grant him immortality so they could be together forever. Zeus agreed. But Eos forgot to ask for eternal youth, along with eternal life. Tithonus lived on, but he kept aging. He grew older and older, his body withering, his mind fading, but unable to die. Eventually, he became so shriveled and small that Eos kept him in a chamber, his voice reduced to an endless, meaningless chirping. In some versions, she finally took pity and transformed him into a cicada, that insect that emerges, sings briefly, and dies. Even as a cicada, he was granted something Eos had accidentally taken away, the mercy of an ending. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's oldest surviving stories, explores similar territory. Gilgamesh, a king of tremendous power, is devastated when his friend Enkidu dies. Unable to accept mortality, Gilgamesh journeys to find Utnapishtim, the only human granted immortality by the gods. He crosses deadly deserts, passes through mountains where no light reaches, all to learn the secret of eternal life. When he finally reaches Utnapishtim, the immortal tells him, there is a plant at the bottom of the deepest ocean that restores youth. Gilgamesh dives down and retrieves it, but on his journey home, while he bathes in a pool, a serpent steals the plant and eats it. This is why snakes shed their skin and seem to renew themselves, while humans must age and die. Gilgamesh returns home empty-handed. The story ends not with him achieving immortality, but with him walking the walls of his city, Uruk, and recognizing that his legacy, his works, the walls themselves, these will outlast him. This is the immortality available to humans, to create something that endures beyond our brief span. Why do so many cultures tell cautionary tales about immortality? Perhaps because living forever would mean watching everyone you love die again and again. It would mean eventually running out of new experiences. Every book would remind you of another book. every conversation would echo previous conversations. Without death as a boundary, would life have any meaning? Would anything feel urgent or precious if you had infinite time? There's a Jewish legend about the Golem of Prague, a creature made of clay and animated by sacred words. The golem couldn't die because it had never truly lived. It existed outside the normal cycle of birth and death, and this made it dangerous. It grew stronger and more difficult to control. Eventually, its creator had to deactivate it, to erase the holy name that gave it animation, because immortality in a mortal world inevitably becomes monstrous. The Chinese myth of Chang'e offers another perspective. Chang'e was the wife of a skilled archer named Houyi. Houyi received an elixir of immortality as a reward for shooting down 9 of the 10 suns that were scorching the earth. But he didn't want to become immortal without his wife, so he hid the elixir, planning to find a way for them both to ascend to immortality together. One day, while Houyi was away, his apprentice tried to steal the elixir. Chang'e, protecting it, swallowed the entire dose herself. Immediately, she began to float. She drifted upward, unable to stop, passing through the roof of her home, rising through the sky. She floated all the way to the moon, where she remains, still, immortal and alone, looking down at the earth where her mortal husband lived out his days and died without her. The moon became associated with her loneliness. Chinese moon festivals celebrate her, but with a melancholic edge. She gained eternal life and lost everything that made life worth living. She's trapped in a kind of timeless existence, unchanging, while far below, the world she knew continues without her, seasons cycling, generations passing. These myths suggest that being bound to time, having a limited span, isn't the curse we sometimes think it is. It's what gives weight to our choices, what makes love precious, what forces us to prioritize and decide what truly matters. An immortal being would have no reason to do anything today rather than tomorrow. Everything could be postponed forever. The urgency that shapes human life, that creates meaning and passion, comes from our mortality. In Norse mythology, the entire universe exists on a great tree called Yggdrasil. This world tree connects 9 realms, and at its roots sit 3 beings called the Norns. Their names are Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld, past, present, and future. These 3 women weave the fates of all beings, gods and mortals alike. Every day, they draw water from the well of Urd and pour it over Yggdrasil's roots, keeping the cosmic tree alive. What's fascinating is that even the gods are subject to time in Norse mythology. The gods can die. They know their future, know that Ragnarok is coming, the twilight of the gods, the end of the world. They know the precise sequence of events. Loki will break free from his chains. Fenrir, the wolf, will swallow the sun. The Midgard serpent will rise from the oceans. And in the final battle, most of the gods will perish. And yet, knowing this future doesn't allow them to change it. Odin, the All-Father, has sacrificed his eye for wisdom. He knows what's coming. But the knowledge doesn't grant control. He can see the future, but he cannot alter it. Fate is fixed. Time, in the Norse view, is not something you can change by knowing it ahead. The future is already written, already real, just as real as the past. This creates a strange paradox. If the future already exists, if it's already determined, then what are we doing when we make choices? Are we really choosing, or are we just playing out a script already written? The ancient Greeks wrestled with this too. they had the Moirai, the Fates, three sisters similar to the Norns. Clotho spun the thread of life. Lachesis measured it, determining how long each life would be. Atropos cut it, bringing death. No one, not even Zeus, could override their decisions. The famous tale of Oedipus illustrates the Greek attitude toward fate. An oracle prophesies that Oedipus will kill his father and marry his mother. His parents, horrified, give him away to be raised by others, trying to prevent the prophecy. Oedipus, learning of the prophecy himself as an adult, flees the people he thinks are his parents, trying to avoid his fate. But every action taken to prevent the prophecy actually brings it about. He kills a stranger on the road who turns out to be his birth father. He marries a widow who turns out to be his mother. The prophecy fulfills itself precisely because everyone tried to avoid it. The Greek tragedies are full of this tension. Humans have free will. They make genuine choices. But those choices somehow lead exactly where fate determined they would go. It's as if free will and predestination are both true simultaneously, even though that seems logically impossible. This isn't just ancient philosophy. It touches on questions physics is still exploring. If time is a dimension, like space, if past, present, and future all exist equally in a four-dimensional space-time block, then in what sense are we moving through time? Maybe we're not moving at all. Maybe all moments exist simultaneously, and our consciousness just perceives them sequentially, like reading a book page by page, even though all the pages exist at once. From this perspective, everything that will ever happen to you has, in some sense, already happened. It exists in the future just as solidly as the past exists in memory. Your death is already there, waiting in your personal timeline. Everything you'll ever do is already done, from a timeless perspective, outside the flow. This sounds fatalistic, maybe even depressing. But there's another way to look at it. If all moments exist eternally, then nothing is ever truly lost. That perfect day you experienced once, it's still happening, always. From outside time, that moment exists forever, eternally now. Every good thing that ever happened to you is still happening in its eternal moment. And every hard thing too is contained in its moment, not spreading forward to poison all future moments. The Sanskrit term Lila captures something of this view. Lila means divine play. In Hindu philosophy, the universe is Brahman, the infinite consciousness, playing. Time and space, multiplicity and change, all of it is Brahman pretending to be many things, pretending to forget its unity, engaging in cosmic drama just for the experience of it. From this view, you are not separate from the eternal. You are the eternal, temporarily experiencing itself as a limited, mortal being, living in time, so that it can know what sequence feels like, what suspense and surprise and loss and hope feel like. These things can only be experienced from within time. Outside time, in the eternal now, everything simply is. The Aztec people had a profound relationship with time through their god Tezcatlipoca, whose name means smoking mirror. He represented fate, sorcery, and the night sky, but also time itself in its most unpredictable aspect. Tezcatlipoca carried a mirror made of obsidian that showed the future, but the future it showed was shrouded in smoke. Never quite clear. The Aztecs believed that time was not a straight line, but a series of cycles, each age ending in destruction and renewal. They lived with the constant awareness that their current world, the fifth sun, would eventually be destroyed by earthquakes, just as previous worlds had been destroyed by jaguars, wind, fire, and flood. This cyclical destruction wasn't pessimistic. It was realistic. Everything that begins must end, but every ending seeds a new beginning. Time devours its children, but time also gives birth perpetually. The Aztecs performed elaborate rituals to maintain the cosmic order, to keep the sun rising, to prevent time from simply stopping. They understood something we've perhaps forgotten, that time's continuation is not guaranteed. It requires participation, attention, ritual. The universe could simply wind down, freeze, end. That it doesn't, that it keeps going. That's the real miracle. In Egyptian mythology, there's a lesser-known deity named He, who personified eternity and infinity. He was often depicted kneeling, holding a notched palm branch in each hand, symbols of the years. Above his head sometimes floated the symbol for infinity. He represented not chronological time, not the measured ticking of days and years, but cyclical, eternal time. Time that curves back on itself, endlessly. The Egyptians had two concepts of time: Nehe, the cyclical time of natural rhythms and eternal return, and Jet, linear time that stretched toward infinity. Embodied Nehe, the sense that time is a circle where everything that has happened will happen again, where the dead return, where endings and beginnings touch. The Egyptians believed that after death, if you passed through the trials of the underworld, you would join the gods in a realm where time no longer moved in the oppressive forward march of mortal life. You would exist in Jet, in the eternal now. Your name spoken in prayer by the living would bring you briefly into Neha, into cyclical time, allowing you to influence the world. But your essence rested in Jet, beyond time's reach. There's a Zen koan that asks, what was your face before your parents were born? It's not asking about reincarnation exactly. It's pointing towards something prior to time, prior to your birth, prior to the entire sequence of events you call your life. What remains when you strip away all temporal identity? What were you before time began? What will you be after time ends? These questions aren't meant to be answered with words. They're meant to crack open your usual way of thinking, to give you a glimpse of something that can't be captured in sequential language, because language itself unfolds in time. Subject, verb, object, one word after another. How do you describe the eternal present except by violating its nature and turning it into past or future? The Christian mystic Meister Eckhart wrote about something he called the eternal now. He said that God doesn't exist in time, and when the soul touches God in deep prayer, it too escapes time momentarily. Past, present, and future collapse into a single moment of union. Eckhart described it as being born before the creation of the world, existing in a timeless origin point where you and God are not separate. The church authorities of his time were uncomfortable with this teaching. It sounded too close to saying humans could become God, could escape the mortal condition entirely. But Eckhart wasn't claiming you could live permanently outside time. He was saying that in certain moments of grace, the boundary between temporal and eternal becomes thin, and you can glimpse what's on the other side. Every mystical tradition contains similar accounts. The Sufi poets write about Fana, annihilation of the separate self, when the drop realizes it's part of the ocean and always has been. In that realization, time stops meaning anything, because there's no separate entity moving through time, just the eternal ocean wearing the temporary mask of an individual wave. Buddhist meditation aims for similar insights. When you watch thoughts arise and pass away, when you notice that even your sense of being a continuous self is just a series of momentary consciousnesses strung together, you begin to see through the illusion of persistent identity. And if your identity doesn't persist, what are you that time can measure? In Tibetan Buddhism, there's a meditation practice called phawa, consciousness transference, meant to be practiced at the moment of death. The practitioner visualizes their consciousness as a luminous sphere shooting upward through the crown of the head, merging with enlightened consciousness beyond time and form. Advanced practitioners are said to achieve phawa during life, experiencing what lies beyond death while still living. They report that on the other side of time, there is no fear, no loss, no separation. Everything that seemed to happen sequentially reveals itself as simultaneous. All beings who have ever lived and will ever live exist together in one eternal moment. These are not easy concepts to hold. They're meant to be destabilizing, meant to shake your certainty that you know what time is, that you know what you are, and that's okay. You don't have to resolve the paradox tonight. Maybe the paradox is the point. The ancient Mayan calendar famously ended in 2012, which caused a lot of apocalyptic speculation. But the Maya themselves never said the world would end. They said a great cycle would complete and a new one would begin. Their long count calendar measured immense cycles of time, and when one cycle ends, another starts. Time is circular, or rather, it spirals. You return to similar positions, but never exactly the same place because you've traveled the spiral's length. This is echoed in many traditions. The Hindu concept of yugas, vast ages of the world, each lasting thousands or millions of years, cycling from golden ages of enlightenment to dark ages of ignorance and back again. We're supposedly in the Kali Yuga now, the age of darkness, but it too will end, and the cycle will begin anew. The concept of yugas is staggering in scale. A complete cycle of 4 yugas equals 4,320,000 years. 1,000 of these cycles equals 1 day of Brahma, and Brahma lives for 100 of his years. When you calculate it out, the universe undergoes cycles of creation and destruction, spanning trillions upon trillions of years. Human history, all of recorded civilization, is barely a blink in this cosmic timescale. And yet, the myth says, even these vast cycles repeat endlessly. Universes are born, live, die, and are reborn forever. Even in Christianity, which is usually thought of as having a linear view of time, there are echoes of circular time. The liturgical year repeats endlessly. Every year, Christmas comes again, Easter comes again. The same stories are retold, the same rituals performed. You inhabit sacred time, kairos, time thick with meaning, time that connects you to every previous celebration of these same moments. Perhaps both views are true. Time is a line from creation to apocalypse, from alpha to omega. And simultaneously, time is a circle, endlessly returning. Or perhaps time is a helix, a spiral that looks like it's returning, but is actually ascending, or descending, or simply spinning in place. The Ouroboros, that ancient symbol of a serpent eating its own tail, represents this circular time. It's found in Egyptian iconography, in Greek philosophy, in Norse mythology, in alchemical texts. The snake consumes itself and is reborn from itself eternally. End and beginning are the same. Everything returns and nothing returns. The cycle is endless, and the cycle is one complete thing. And here's where we arrive at the deepest mystery. If time is an illusion, if past and future are just mental constructs and only the present exists, then what is the present? How long does now last? A second? A millisecond? Can you divide the present into smaller and smaller slices until it becomes infinitely thin, a mathematical point with no duration at all? If the present has no duration, then only past and future exist. But we've already said those are illusions. So where does that leave us? Nowhere, everywhere, no when. The ancient Buddhist philosopher Nagarjuna explored this paradox. He argued that if you try to pin down the existence of anything, you find only emptiness. Not emptiness as in nothing, but emptiness as in lack of inherent existence. Everything is relative. Everything depends on everything else, and nothing has independent being. This includes time itself. Past, present, and future define each other. You can't have a present without past and future, but past and future are not present. They don't exist now. So, the present depends on things that don't exist to define it, which means the present, too, is empty, lacking inherent existence. This isn't nihilism. It's actually liberation. If time has no solid, independent existence, then you're not trapped by it. You're not marching helplessly toward death. You're not burdened by an unchangeable past. You're free, in this moment, to be what you are, which is something more fundamental than time. Let yourself rest in that idea. Not to understand it fully, that may not be possible with the thinking mind, but to feel it. Just for a moment, notice that you're here. Not in the past, not in the future. Here. And here is the only place you've ever been. You've never existed in any other moment but now. You think you remember the past, but that remembering is happening now. You think you anticipate the future, but that anticipating is happening now. This moment is all there is. It's all there has ever been. And yet, paradoxically, this moment contains everything. All of history leads to this breath. All possible futures branch out from it. The eternal is not somewhere else, someplace you go after death or achieve through enlightenment. The eternal is the depth of this very moment, the ever-present now that your life floats upon like a boat on an ocean. The ancient texts say, time is a river, and you are not the water. You are not even the boat. You are the shore watching the river flow, eternal and unchanged, while the contents of time rush past. Or they say, time is a dream, and you are the dreamer, infinite consciousness, having a finite experience, playing all the parts, watching the story unfold, even though you're writing it yourself moment by moment. Or they say, time is the breath of God, and you are one note in an infinite symphony. Your brief appearance and disappearance no more separate from the eternal music than a single wave is separate from the ocean. These are metaphors, of course. They point toward something that can't be said directly. But maybe you can feel what they're pointing to. That sense that time is both completely real and completely illusory. That you are trapped in its flow and simultaneously free of it. That nothing changes and everything changes. That all the moments of your life are equally present, laid out like beads on a string. And you are not the beads, but the string itself, or the hand that holds it, or the awareness that contemplates the whole pattern. We started this journey asking what time is. We've traveled through history, through legend, through myth. We've seen how humans have measured it, feared it, tried to escape it, tried to master it. And we end here, in this quiet moment, with a question that has no answer and needs no answer. Because whatever time is, you're here in it, or it's here in you, or you're both together, creating something that seems so solid and yet dissolves when you look closely. And that's all right. That's beautiful, even. Your life is a brief pattern in time. It rises like a wave, holds its shape for a while, then subsides back into the ocean. But the ocean is not diminished. The pattern is not lost. Every wave that has ever risen still exists in the eternal now, outside the flow, where nothing is ever truly gone. So rest easy. Time will carry you. It always has. From your first breath to this moment, time has borne you along, and it will carry you forward still, until the day comes when you slip out of time altogether and discover what was always there beneath it. There's no hurry. There never was. The urgent feeling, that sense that time is running out, it comes from living on the surface of moments, skimming across them without sinking into their depth. But each moment is infinitely deep. You could fall into this single breath forever and never reach the bottom. So breathe now. Feel the air move in and out. Notice how breathing doesn't happen in time. Time happens in breathing. The space between breaths is not empty. It's full of eternity. And when sleep comes, let it come. Let time soften around you. Let the boundaries between past and present blur. Let yourself drift into that place where dreams and memories mingle, where you're every age at once, where the you who was 5 years old and the you who is now and the you who will be exist together in a space beyond time's reach. Time is a gift, not because it lasts, but because it ends, because ending gives shape, because mortality makes each moment precious, because you can't hold on to time, you're free to let it go, again and again, releasing each moment as it passes into the next. So let go now. Let this moment pass, and this one, and this one, each moment arriving like a gift you didn't ask for and dissolving like a gift you can't keep. The eternal giving and taking away, the endless now, forever arriving, forever departing, forever here. Welcome to the mystery of time. Welcome to the present moment, which is all you have and all you need. Welcome to the eternal, disguised as the temporary, inviting you to wake up inside the dream. And when you do wake, whether from sleep or from the sleep we call waking life, perhaps you'll carry this with you. Time is not your enemy. Death is not your end. You're not separate from the eternal. You never have been. You're just playing a role, temporarily, in this magnificent, bewildering, heartbreaking, beautiful dance of moments we call a life. Thank you for spending this time with me. Or rather, thank you for being timeless with me, for touching the eternal together in this shared moment that is already gone, and yet somehow always here. Rest well, dream deeply, and may you wake refreshed, ready to live each moment fully, knowing that time is both everything and nothing, and you are free. Sleep well, curious mind. Until next time, or outside of time, or in that mysterious space where the two meet and both dissolve into something else entirely. Good night.